Welcome to the Millennium Marriage Podcast,
where we discuss practical tools and insights into the joys and challenges of marriage.
Hey, family. Welcome back to the Millennium Marriage Podcast.
What's going on, everybody?
I'm Toya.
And I'm Jose.
And we are glad that you're back here to join us today. We're going to get into a conversation about roles in marriage. We're going to dig into what that means biblically and then what that means practically. How do you apply that to your lives? And then give you some simple steps where you can identify the roles, because that seems to be a hot topic nowadays, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The roles have kind of changed drastically since, back in the day.
Back in the day when I was young, I'm not a kid anymore. But some days I sit and wish I was a kid again. Hey, I just dated myself with that one.
You did. You're old.
Hey, watch your mouth.
But yeah, just kind of addressing some things that we may not have known when we were going through this whole journey together and learning as we have gone through it. Yeah,
things that we wish we had an understanding for at that point.
Yeah.
Starting out in our marriage, we've learned the hard way, I guess.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yes.
Lots of error.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to dive right in. We're going to jump into kind of addressing the spiritual and biblical aspect of it. So we're going to do some scriptures, just kind of outlining everything, and really so it makes sense, just kind of going in that direction. So we're going to start with the husband's biblical and spiritual roles. And for the husbands, the number one is to love God. And that was told in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 6. The Lord your God will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your descendants, so that you may love him with all your heart and with all your soul and live. Which I think is pretty deep. Yeah,
God is the head of man. Man is the head of the household. So you got to start there.
Yeah. And that's tough because you're taught to love your wife and then love your children and then love your family and all of those things. But in reality, you're supposed to love God first. And God should always be the head of everything that you're doing and your relationships and just your life in general.
Yeah. And once you establish that relationship with God and acknowledge him as the head of you, then you can do the next step, which would be
love your beautiful, wonderful wife.
Aww.
As Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
And this scripture is coming from Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25 and 26. And it says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word.
Man, that's deep when you think about the way Christ loved the church. Christ died for the church. And I don't know that, when we read that, do we really understand
how deep
that love is?
That's some deep love.
And I think sometimes we get into marriage not understanding that love. If you don't, like I said, if you haven't acknowledged God and gained an understanding for that love that he has for you, how can you then turn and give that love to someone else?
I love you that deeply.
Oh, gosh.
That's bonus points right there.
It's truth, y'all.
It's in the atmosphere now.
Here we go.
The third one is to honor your wife. And that's in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as a weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers.
Do we understand what honor means?
I don't think so. Not anymore.
Yeah. And, society is all about yourselves, honoring myself, self-care, which is important.
Oh, absolutely.
But when we're talking about this kind of love, when we're talking about unconditional agape love, really understanding what honor means, what respect means. In this scripture, I just want to point out that one line says, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. That doesn't mean, one is better than the other or your wife is weak. That just means you are supposed to be the leader as the man of the house. And God made us wives, us women, to be your helpmate. Because something was missing, so we needed to help y'all out. So
there was a lot missing.
So that just goes to prove that we're obviously not weak. But, I just don't want people to read so much into that. Sometimes people get stuck on certain words and then they miss out on everything else that God's trying to tell us. So, but yeah.
And the fourth one, so there is 4, and there's 4 for the husbands and there's 4 for the wives. The fourth one for the husband is to cover his wife. And with covering his wife, that's to protect. That's the providing part. That's the guide. That's being the head of the household, is to cover, is to give your wife a safe space and understanding that there's security where she is. And that's a big one. That's really big.
Yeah, and I think also including in that cover, we have to say this: prayer. Praying over us. And that goes both ways, but right now we're talking about the husband. So that cover includes, you as the head of the household, as the head of our family, are praying to, consulting with God, who's the head of your life, about what direction we're supposed to go. But in that, praying for your wives. Something that stuck out to me, I don't remember the message, but our pastor did a message and he pointed this out where it said, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And it just talks about honoring your wives, loving your wives, because when you don't honor your wives, it's difficult for God to hear that prayer.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't honor your wife that you are in covenant with, in this relationship with, that you have made this covenant with her and with God, why would we think that he's going to honor other prayers? Why would we think that he should honor our careers? Why would we think that he should honor our lives outside of the household if we can't honor the thing that we're supposed to cherish the most? So that line, really always stands out to me now, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. You have to be really earnest in, your leading and your role, period.
Yeah. The marriage is a blessing from God. Your spouse is a blessing that God made just for you. And if you can't take that blessing and help nourish it and take care of it and protect it, then why would he think you're ready for another blessing if you can't take care of the one he's given you?
Yeah. So let's jump to the wives. So we have 4 points as well for the spiritual and biblical roles as a wife. And again, at the top of that list is love God. That's got to be number 1. Whether you're a husband, a wife, a sister, a brother, a mother, a father, whatever, that's our number 1 priority. We love because he first loved us. God loves us so much. He's done so much for us. He created us to be who we are. He created us to give him glory. Our role is to love and honor him throughout our lives. So that's always going to be number 1. Number 2 is always a hot button topic. Submit to your husband. Respect your husband. A lot of women in today's society hear that word submit and they're like, I'm not weak. Like, he's not running over me. What you mean submit? I run this too. There's a partnership. All those things that may have run through my head at one point or another. But, I'm just being real with y'all. It is what it is. When you don't know, you don't know. But in reality, Ephesians 5:22 breaks it down. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Again, the Lord is the head of man. Man is the head of the household. So us submitting to our husbands is also showing that we're submitting to the Lord. Also in 1 Peter 3, verses 1 through 2, Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. So when we talk about submitting, it's not just about submitting in your words or just following along with what they do, because there are some situations where spiritually the wife may be there and the husband's not, or the husband may be there and the wife's not. And it's our responsibility as a married couple to really encourage each other in the Lord. And that's not beating them over the head with Bible verses every 5 minutes. That's living life the way God told you to do it. And then when your spouse sees that, then they have a better understanding of what Christ called us to do, not just based off of what you say and you're doing the opposite. Right. So it's like if I am believing certain things from God, even if my husband is not on the same page, I have to continue to be faithful. I have to continue to go to church. I have to continue to pray. I have to continue to honor him, even if I don't feel like I'm being honored. And I think that is what's missing in our relationships today, because, again, we're just so self-centered, where it's like, well, I'm not getting this, so I'm not about to give it to you. No, like that's not the way, that's not the example that Jesus has given us. So that is really, really big to me.
That's huge.
Next point would be that God made us to be our husband's helpmate. Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." And again, I mentioned this earlier, he made us to be a helpmate because obviously there was something missing, right? Not saying our men aren't amazing, handsome, strong creatures. Hey, Bill. But there was something that God saw where he said it's not good for him to be alone. So when God made us, he made something special that is meant to complement our husbands, not to compete with, not to bow down to, but to complement. We were made to complement each other. So we really have to be mindful of that and the way God made us. And then lastly, we have love your husband. I mean, it sounds easy. It sounds simple, but one thing we talked about in another episode is that men and women don't necessarily, for the most part, receive love the same way. And love means for a man to support, to encourage, to affirm him, not to talk down to him, not to degrade him. That is the opposite of the type of love that we as wives should be given to our husbands. They need our support. They need our encouragement. They need us to be their biggest cheerleader. And that's really important, I believe, when it comes to loving our husband, babe.
No, absolutely. You agree? I think especially in this generation that we're in, it's like it's a competition between husband and wife, and it shouldn't be. You should be partners, and what you're competing against is everything else that's on the outside, not what's inside. And when that starts happening, then it starts to become that give and take atmosphere of I did this and you didn't do that, and instead of everyone just flowing in one accord and, like you said, affirming things. And that goes both ways. For the husband needs to do the same thing. But I feel like the man needs that so much more. They need to feel that they're being respected, or they know that their wives have their back. And I think that's really, really big.
Yeah. So that is the basis. When it comes to marriage, we've said this before. God is the center of our marriage. God is the center of our lives. He is the sharpest tool that we have in the shed to do this thing called marriage. So we really wanted to emphasize some, not all, but the basis of those spiritual roles when it comes to being a husband and being a wife. But we also want to talk about the practical application of those roles. Like in your day-to-day life, who's going to wash the dishes? Who's going to watch the kids? Who's going to work? All of that good stuff. I mean, that is the reality that you have to really figure out what works for you. And no two couples are going to be the same. Traditionally, you know, I guess you could say back in the day, like you said earlier, traditionally, the husband would be the provider, the handyman around the house, the disciplinarian. You know, when dad comes home, everything better be straight, you know. The wife would be the caretaker, the cook, the family manager, just keeping everybody together. But that has changed. And that's not to say that some of those roles can and won't still exist. But you can't assume that your marriage is going to fit into that box. Because as people, we're not those same people. As a society, we don't function the same way. And we don't have the same needs. Things have changed, so we have to be able to adjust. And even now, when it comes to wives, the women have always had so many roles to juggle. So along with the ones I already talked about, like now today, they're also providers. You know, it's more of a partnership in that aspect. And then really important members of society. Women have such a large role in advocating right now for families, for women, for children. And they're trying to do that and balance that with taking care of their own households. So it really is important to look at what works for you, what you have on your plate, each of you individually, and then as a family. And then we have some steps that we think will help you identify the roles that work for you and your spouse.
Yeah, so we think there's 3 steps that we want to touch on to identify roles. And the first one was a big one for us early on, was clearly discussing the expectations that each of us had coming in. So if we touched on this in another episode, where just kind of how you were brought up and what you saw as you were growing up kind of dictates what you think or what you expect your roles are going to be in your marriage. And that's when you really need to sit down and discuss those and the expectations so that you're not blindsided. I'm not thinking, oh, she'll take care of that because that's what I always thought. It's more of, okay, really, that's not what she's expecting. And we need to come to understanding what it is we want and knowing what's one of our other ones is identify our strengths and weaknesses. When you have that discussion, you're going to start to see the strengths and the weaknesses or discussing some of that. And then you can continue to move forward with identifying the roles.
Yeah. And I think with, as we talk about discussing the expectations, there are so many unspoken expectations in our relationships. And I don't just mean our marital relationships. When it comes to our kids, when it comes to our friends, when it comes to our jobs, you know. Well, actually, now that I say that about a job, so if you have a position, if you have a career, and you don't know what the expectations are, you don't know what the role is, you know, what the requirements are, what your duties are in that position, it's going to cost you your job. You have to have a clear understanding of the position that you play on the team. And if you don't, 1, it can cause you to lose that position. 2, it's also going to bring down the ship because you're not playing your part. So the rest of the organization either can't function or has difficulty functioning effectively because you don't have a clear understanding of what your role is. So the ball is getting dropped somewhere. And I think we can apply that same concept to our marriage. If I don't have a clear understanding of what your expectations are from me as a wife, and you don't have a clear understanding of mine, we're just assuming, oh yeah, I mean, she's a wife. She'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, he's a husband. He should know that this is what I want. He should know that this is where I want to go tonight. Like, no, we can't put that on our partners. It's not fair for us to put that on our partners. So we really, when we talk about discussing these expectations, guys, we got to get down to the nitty gritty. Mm-hmm. We can't sugarcoat. We can't, partially, give insight into what we want or drop hints, because us ladies, I'm sorry, babe, let me apologize for all the times that I dropped hints to you thinking, okay, now he's going to go do that because I just dropped this hint or whatever. Because we tend to do that, ladies. Like, oh, he should know. How? Because what he knows is based off of his experience. It's based off of what his mother did. It's based off of what he saw on TV. But you don't want him to compare you to your mother, to his mother. So you have to be clear about your expectations.
That's very good. Just understanding that a lot of men, we're more simplistic. It's more, we need more direction. We need more information to do things, where women are like the complete opposite. So it's like, you're dealing with that aspect of it, and then you're expecting something that you never verbalized. So it's really on us to kind of figure out these hints, like you said, these hints that you're dropping, or these little nuggets that you left on the floor for me to pick up, to figure out what really it is. Oh, she just wanted me to take the trash out. It's just a lot where we could save so much stress and headache and arguments and everything else by just verbalizing everything and having those discussions. Is like, it would just make everything so much easier.
Yeah. So moving on to the next step, which is, as Jose mentioned, identifying strengths and weaknesses. I think these two steps kind of go hand in hand. Yeah. You definitely discuss the expectations first, but you have to be realistic about those expectations based on the other person's strengths and weaknesses, right?
So we have 3 steps, and they actually all go hand in hand.
They do.
They really go hand in hand. So clearly discuss expectations is the first one. Identify strengths and weaknesses, and then you got to be flexible. And that kind of all plays a part in all 3. So in order to identify your strengths and weaknesses, you got to be flexible. You have to not only be flexible, but remove your pride from the whole conversation, because we can be so prideful sometimes, like, oh no, I can do that. That's a strength. Well, no, it's not. It's a weakness. You're not good at it. And we just don't want to admit it. And it's like,
with love.
Exactly. With love, but really, no. You're just not good at that. That's just not your strength. So, being flexible and removing the pride out of it, and really just opening up for that information to come through and say, all right, you know what? Okay, I'm not good at it. You're better at that than I am. And then starting to lock down those roles and say, all right, well, I can do this and I can do that and you can do this. And I think that played a really big part for us.
Absolutely.
Especially, I think we kind of had that conversation earlier on.
Yeah, especially because like we moved in together before we got married and all that, which we do not, which we do not recommend. Okay. At the time, we weren't in a place that we were really thinking about that on a higher level though. But yeah, we ran into more challenges that kind of forced us to identify our strengths and weaknesses at that point. So, when you're doing that, it's really important, like you said, to be flexible, to be compassionate, to be empathetic and understanding regarding the other person's strengths and weaknesses. Something that I had to deal with personally was understanding that God made us differently for a reason. We talked about earlier, the wives being the husband's helpmeet. And that was intentional, but initially for me, I have always been very driven and taking initiative, and like I go 100% sometimes where I need to be at like 50, y'all. I don't know how to sit down. So I'm like over the top with everything, and used to really strive for perfection. And there might have been something that I would be doing or I wanted help with, that I'm like, Jose, I need you to do this. And he may not have had an understanding of how to do it, or didn't do it as well as I thought it should have been done, or the way I thought it should have been done. But guess what? That's not his strength.
And that's a big thing, because if we can have a task and you do a task a certain way, you get it done. But then I can do that same task and I do it a completely different way, but it gets done.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to remove because our mentality is, well, you didn't do it right. And then that leads to something. And it's like, okay, you asked me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You got the same, I got the same result.
Right.
But I didn't do it the way that you would do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're mad because I didn't do it the way that you would do it.
Even though I did it.
Even though,
like you asked me.
Yeah. And then it just turns into, okay, well, if that was the case, do it yourself.
Right.
And it's that mentality that could cause a lot of conflict. And it's on both sides.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle because we would do that, you know? And then I would take that attitude. I'll just do it myself next time. And then I'm overwhelmed again. And I'm right back to, I need your help. But I don't want to ask for your help. So I either ask for your help with an attitude, or I'm not going to ask for your help at all. And then I'm going to flip out because I'm just burnt out. You know, so it goes back to what you emphasized earlier, pride.
Yeah.
You know, we have to swallow our pride and really acknowledge that we're just different, and it's okay, because that's the way God intended it to be, so that we could be helpful to each other. So where I'm strong and you may be weak, it's the opposite in the next role. You know, like finances is not my thing, y'all. Listen, ask me to write a 12-page paper in 45 minutes. I got you. But don't ask me to give you the amount for the tip at the restaurant. Like, it's not, you don't want me to do that because you're going to be out some money that you didn't have to be out of, okay? So that's a strength of Jose's. When it comes to numbers, I remember, don't kill me because I'm putting this out there.
Man.
Listen, y'all, let me tell y'all about my husband, okay? We used to be driving on the highway, and he would he would look at the license plate in front of us, the 6-digit license plate, and in 3 seconds identify what 6-digit number had to be added to that for it to get to $1 million. Like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, who enjoys doing that? I used to be so irritated because I'm like, why? Like, you just wanna add numbers up? So what?
Let's be honest. It wasn't irritated. You were hating.
I was hating.
You couldn't.
I was hating because and I still can't.
Right.
But why is it necessary? So
it's
what?
Not. It's like keeping my brain fresh and on point.
Listen, I felt like, so you just gonna rub it in that you can put numbers together and I can't? Okay.
It's a little OCD-ish, to be honest.
It is, but I'm gonna leave that alone.
We're not going to discuss that kind of stuff.
But again, that is one of his strengths. So in our marriage, it's a blessing because when it comes to the budget, when it comes to paying the bills, when it comes to when it comes to helping these kids with this new math, this Common Core stuff, I don't know about y'all, but I'm over it. But listen, him and our youngest son, they are the numbers folks. Myself and my oldest son, we are the creatives. We are the readers and writers. So again, we balance each other out.
Yeah.
And that's really what this whole thing is. It's about being partners.
And that's literally what you guys just pretty much found your strengths and your weaknesses. And I mean, it took a lot of time, and it just understanding them. Mm-hmm. And just like me, I can't cook. I am not a cooker. In my household, my father wasn't the cook. My mother was. So coming into that.
In my household, y'all, my mom and dad was cooking. So when we got together, I was like, bro, what you doing? Like, you not going to make me a meal? Like,
that's the thing, that my father could cook. He was a chef. Right. He did it. But it was like, when I get home, I'm not doing my job at home, and so my mom did it. So just seeing that, I was never taught to cook. So I knew that was a weakness for me, and you were an amazing cook.
Oh,
so
thanks, Bill.
Listen, I don't understand how I'm not 300 pounds right now because the food is so good.
Oh, look at him trying to butter me up, y'all, so I can keep cooking and not complain about it. He's so cute.
That's points again. It's bonuses.
2 points for Jose.
Yeah.
In one episode. Woo. I gotta step my game up, ladies. I need some help. Send me some tips.
This stuff is national now.
Oh gosh.
It's national news.
Anyway, wait, I had a point regarding that when it came to so one of the things we have been able to do over the years, and I think we're in such a great place now compared to, again, we've been together 22 years. We lived together 15 of those years. Yeah. And then we've been married going on 13. So we've had a long time to work out the kinks and practice this stuff. So don't think it's going to happen overnight. But one of the things, like he said with cooking, okay, I'm okay with cooking most of the time, right? Every once in a while, I might want a hot meal prepared. That goes with that being flexible, right? So just because you establish roles does not mean you are locked into those roles and the partner can't help. Let me just throw that out there, okay?
Absolutely.
So when we say must be flexible, we don't just mean you understanding their strengths and weaknesses. You have to be flexible. We need to understand that the actual roles have to be flexible because you have different seasons. Things that we did when we first got married, roles that we had at that point have shifted. Oh, yeah. Not all of them, but some of them have shifted. And then even if they haven't and it's still established, hey, this is pretty much my role, this is pretty much yours, it's okay to step in and help sometimes. Like, if he comes home from work and the trash needs to be taken out and he just told me on his way home how much of a rough day he had and I'm already in the kitchen cleaning up, why can't I take the trash out? Like, that's part of honoring my husband. That's part of being his helpmate. That's part of just making sure that there's balance and I'm showing him care and love. And that is the love language, acts of service, right? Mm-hmm. So if that's your spouse's love language, that's a simple way that you could apply acts of service by doing something that they normally do, but just saying, hey, babe, I'll take care of it tonight. Don't worry about it. And without them asking.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing, too, with our roles, we get so stuck in the fact that we have this role and we do it, right? But as a partner, I'm so used to you cooking. I'm so used to you doing this over and over again that I have to make sure and be intentional on saying, babe, thank you so much for making me dinner and giving you that acknowledgement and telling you I appreciate it. And sometimes we just get so stuck because it's a role and it's all right. They always do it, whatever. Mm-hmm. And really, it could go so far by just saying, like, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you just did, even though you do it all the time. Like, but I just appreciate the fact that you do it, And I think, at least I know for men, it says a lot, especially for me personally, right. when you do those things. So
words of affirmation.
Yep.
So one more note about being flexible is that the traditional roles don't always have to be the traditional roles, right? If the woman makes more money in her career and you guys get to a point where it's like, why are we paying for childcare? We want to homeschool our kids. Maybe it's best that the husband stays home and homeschools the kids because he has an education background. Or, that's just a gift of his or an interest of his or whatever the case may be. The women usually do all the laundry. That's historically, that's kind of been the picture, I guess you would say, that has been put out there. The woman is cooking and washing the dishes and doing the laundry. Guess what, y'all? I don't do laundry.
Well, there's a reason why.
Well, I'm just saying because that's not my strength. We've established that, so we've been flexible because I'm a little absent-minded and I like to leave clothes in the washer. So we had to adjust their role.
And I don't like smelling like mildew, so I step in and I take care of that.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that. Yeah, and even like I don't like doing the dishes, right? But neither does he. So one of the deals that we made there is like, if you cook, I'll do the dishes, or like, I'm just here. I'm going to clean them anyway because I need this dish or whatever. I might as well just clean them all. So don't get so stuck in he has to do this, she has to do that. Don't get so stuck. You have to be flexible. You have to be open. You have to be willing to acknowledge your partner's strengths and weaknesses and be willing to step up sometimes and fill in the gaps.
Yeah, don't throw it in their face either. If it's a weakness and you've already acknowledged that it's a weakness, don't come home and say, why didn't you wash the dishes? And it's like, okay, we already discussed, like, that's just not something that is not a strength. And it might not be the dishes, but just for an example, making sure that you're just not pointing those things out to each other is key.
Yeah. And one more thing, this is kind of going backwards a little bit, but in identifying strengths and weaknesses, and Jose, you touched on this a little bit about just our humility, kind of dropping our pride, being able to receive from your spouse who's going to tell you with love. They gonna I'm laughing, but y'all know we got to say this because we can get rowdy sometimes. We want to point out our partner's faults and we're right and they're wrong type of thing. No, there's a way to say things with love where you can you can kind of point out, babe, why don't you let me try that? Like, I know you struggle with this, so let me step in. Or do you want me to help you learn how to do this better? Rather than, oh my gosh, you never do it right, just forget it, I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to be able to communicate that with love and be honest with our partners about something that we can see that they may not be able to see. Like, they're in it. So sometimes an outside eye can see, that's not really your strength you think it is, but at the same time, the partner receiving that constructive criticism has to be humble enough to receive that with love and not feel like they're under attack. I mean, it is what it is. We can't all do everything. We were not all meant to do everything, and we have to be okay with that.
It's like the whole helpmate portion. It's like if you didn't need anyone, or if I was able to do everything on my own, why do I need my spouse? I'll be by myself.
Yep.
If I could do everything on my own, I don't need my spouse. And that's kind of the mentality that you have to have. Like, we were all made for each other. We were all beautifully made for each other. And you got to accept that.
Yeah. We all have a different gift from God. We all have a different piece of the essence of Jesus, and we all have to allow him to use us for those things that he gifted us with specifically. So we hope you guys got something out of that. Just a brief recap. First, we talked about the spiritual biblical roles of husbands and wives. For the husbands,
love God, love your wife, honor your wife, and cover your wife.
Yeah, and for the wives, again, love God, submit to and respect your husband, be their helpmate, and love your husband. And then we talked about practical roles. How do you apply those biblical roles into your relationship? Through practical actions, your everyday, day to day, and not getting so caught up in the traditional roles. And then we talked about 3 steps to identify those roles. Number 1,
clearly discuss expectations.
Clearly identify each other's strengths and weaknesses. And
you got to be flexible. You got to swallow that pride and be open to receiving this information.
Yes. So we hope you all got at least one nugget out of that you can apply to your marriage. We look forward to continuing to go deeper with you guys regarding our marriage and how we can strengthen them. But until next time, stay encouraged and keep investing in each other for a marriage that will last a lifetime. See you later, guys.
Peace out.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe and share. Keep up with us on social media at Millennium Marriage and visit our website at millenniummarriage.com.